When I was about, I think it was like 13 or 14, I had a boyfriend that put on the band Typo Negative, and I heard the song, Let Me Love You Today. And I was like, that sounds phenomenal. That's the best song I've ever heard in my whole life. So then I just put on a bunch of black.
My sister says that I was a goth when I was really little because I was really into like this Victorian style. When I was more in high school, it was more black and like little dresses from the 60s and ripped up fishnets and like white face and lots of black eyeliner.
You know, when you work with death at the beginning, it's scary because you have all these thoughts when you're a child. With time, you learn that death is just a part of life. And the person that's deceased isn't going to hurt you, no matter all the movies you see and all the things you hear. I remember people telling me things like, oh, I heard that in the mortuary that the bodies will sit up when they're deceased. And I looked at them and I go, do you think I'd be working? I lived in a funeral home and I have seen many people deceased. Do you think I'd be working in the funeral home if that was true? It's not true. And so a lot of people have these misconceptions, you know, that they see the body move or there's ghosts or whatever.
It's definitely, I think, sensationalized on TV and in the movies and whatnot. And it's not as flashy as they make it out to be. You know, it's kind of grim, and it's, you know, there isn't a lot of, I guess you'd say, like romance that goes into it. You know, it's pretty cut and dry.
I may have embalmed probably over, I don't know, maybe 700 people. Here I am at 19 years old. Of course, I didn't start embalming till I was 20, so it almost didn't seem real at first. And then later, I was so interested in science in school, anatomy and physiology and biology and the human body. I knew so much already. So then it became very interesting to me.
Most of the time when I was dealing with people, they were coming out of the fridges, so they were cold. And so it didn't really faze me much at all. The first call that I went on to go pick somebody up who had passed away, that was a little odd because that was the first time somebody was warm. That was kind of when I sort of realized what I was doing. Up until then, it was just, it was just a body. I went on a call, and it was somebody who had hung themselves. We had to cut him down, and so I was catching, and my partner who I went with was actually cutting. So that was a little weird, having to hold somebody when we were cutting them down after they committed suicide. So.
As you work here longer, it does become very emotional, but I look now and I feel like I said, if something happened to me now and I was gone, I think I made a difference and helped families, and that's what makes it important to me.
I hadn't had much experience with death. I hadn't had anybody really close to me pass away, so I didn't really have much emotion to it. It was just kind of a job, and it was, it paid the bills and it had a flexible schedule.
The first funeral I went to was my grandfather's, and my poor grandmother was hysterical, crying and talking in Spanish and holding me at the casket, and I was crying. I was 11 years old, and it was a very emotional. They were Spaniards, everybody wore black, and I was scared because I saw my grandfather in the casket.
The more I've embraced the shadow parts or death, the more alive I've felt. When you're goth, you're just trying to make the fairy tales real all the time. I'm wearing it on the outside and trying to create magic around you. There were a lot of drugs when I was a teenager. So I guess there were kind of alternative states of trying to experience a liminal place in between life and death. But I don't know if I want to die is something very poetic to me. It's more like, oh, let's get in between and let's figure out, let's be in alternative states. I saw people around me experiencing poverty and experiencing racism and extreme forms of homophobia using a lot of drugs to pull themselves away from actually feeling. It was kind of the opposite of where I was going. I was trying to feel more. But I imagine that maybe if more actual death had happened in my life, it would have felt different, and there would have been more fear. I probably wouldn't have explored on the edge so much.
It's all about exploring your fears, really, and for me, death is all about fear. For me personally, I don't really fear death, I just fear death itself. It's just I fear the pain and what I don't know about it. The guy in Slayer, the singer, it's well known that he's fascinated with serial killers and that sort of thing. I think he's a good example of like the typical metal person into death. Like, he's just fascinated by it. Punk rock was really the first physically aggressive music that there was, and metal got a lot of its aggressiveness from punk rock. So, these mosh pits you see at these shows, a lot of that is rooted in the early 80s, late 70s British punk rock scene. If you look at old footage, you'll see that's where they got real violent, missing teeth, and just everyone's got bruises, and and they're all just pissed off because they're broke and they're not happy with their government, and they're pissed off, and all they have is their toast in the morning and their drugs in the evening. Like, that's all they have. So of course they're pissed off. It's kind of evolved into more of a like an expression of the animal side, I think, of I think that everyone has anger and they express it different ways. And some people go to work and they express it to their workmates, or they hit their wife, or they hit their kid, or whatever. But metal people go to a show and they hit each other, and it's organized and it's understood, and it's okay, really. I mean, it's not that big a deal. It's like an organized way to express violence, and it's like you can't erase violence, so you may as well organize it, kind of like in a boxing ring.
Well, I was already a weirdo my whole life, so I kind of loved that, and I'm sure that people thought that I was out there, but I also was so anti that I just didn't, like, when they responded, I was like, yes, I'm not like you.
My philosophy is that the devil is only God when he's drunk, which is what Tom Waits said about that. I believe in drinking, I believe in smoking, I believe in prescribing and describing every single deity you can find, because Jesus loves you, Satan hates you, and whatever is whatever.
When I started being really goth is when I got my first deck of tarot cards and really became involved with Wicca. And that has a lot to do with life and death and rebirth and regeneration. It's about our relationship to light and how the earth turns away and towards the sun. So we experience it every day, the cycle, and we experience it throughout the year, and it's about my attentiveness to coiling in and going inward in the winter, and then coming outward through the spring and expanding in the summer, and then going inward again. That's the life cycle, but it happens when we breathe, and it happens every day, and it happens every year.
And I always think, if I do something to help a family, they're probably going to leave and maybe help somebody else. And that's why I look at life. And I take each day of life as a gift, and I try not to waste it. I really enjoy life.
The way that I was trained as a psychotherapist is really about embracing what comes, and death is part of something that comes, and being able to stay open and present with what comes. Very connected to Buddhism. That has influenced my comfortability with death and dying.
Death is a part of life. It's the end of this life, and it just matters on your religious beliefs. I believe that this is just a stopover, that this is just a comma in a sentence, and then there's life after. Death is a part of life. Death is at the end. So remember, we have the date we're born and the date we died, and that little dash in between is what we do with our life. So whatever you do with your life, that's what you determine.
And if you wanna sing out, sing out. And if you wanna be free, be free. There's a million things to be, you know that there are. And if you wanna live high, live high. And if you wanna live low, live low. There's a million ways to go.
Death is not death. It's
And we-
evolution. It's
And we all gotta
change.
love it.
Yes, you do.
Because we want